welcome to our live chat. We are doing a young adult live chat tonight with several of our young adult mentors, and we will start with introductions, and then we will take questions from Twitter using the hashtag AskMentor. And so we will start with Summer, and then just introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Summer.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Summer Spence. I am a young adult mentor, as Heather said, and I write young fantasy mostly because I can't seem to do anything without magic. But I do like other things and accept them on my wish list, contemporary fantasy like I, and I'm excited to see yourselves.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I write young adult contemporary, but I also love fantasy. I have a co-mentor this year, is Rebecca Sky, and we're taking anything kind of within the range of contemporary and fantasy. We just really want high concept, really emotional stories, so as long as it fits that, most genres we're good with.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm from Australia, if you can't tell by my accent. I'm wanting to mentor anything in YA that's like really different and unusual. I don't care what genre or if you mash genres together. I just want something that I haven't seen before.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kit. And is this working? Okay, I hope so. I write YA. I write contemporary suspense, thriller, dabble in magical realism. And I am co-mentoring this year with Rachel Lynn Solomon. She is also a contemporary YA writer. And we are accepting contemporary submissions in a variety of subgenres, including realistic, mystery, thriller, and suspense, and magical realism, contemporary with speculative elements. We're really excited to see all of your awesome YA.
Hi, I am Kelly Hopkins, and I am mentoring YA this year. I am interested in YA fantasy, paranormal, any kind of contemporary magic, mythical retelling. Give me something that really excites you and strong characters that sell your story. Looking forward to reading all of your submissions.
Brenda, your turn.
Okay, sorry about that. I typed, who am I after again? I forgot. That's so great. Hi everyone, I'm Brenda Drake. I'm a YA author and the founder of Pitch Wars. We are pretty much doing the scavenger hunt where we are picking it's a random pick for who Heather Cashman and I will be mentoring this year. So I'm not going to say what we're looking for, but if you have questions for me tonight, you're welcome to ask them on the hashtag. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Trueblood. I am a new mentor this year, but I was a mentee in 2013 and 2014. I had to drop out in 2014 because I was lucky enough to sign with an agent during the whole process, and Brenda was wonderful about that and very sweet to me, so it was very nice. So this year I am going to mentor YA historical. That's what I predominantly write, and contemporary. I'm looking for any time period, just really looking for strong characters, strong setting, which is really important in historical. I'm also looking for YA contemporary. In YA contemporary, I'm looking for family stories, male POV, dual POV, something with a lot of heart, I love stories about families, siblings, and even somebody mentioned the other day about sports. I'd love a sports story. Something with a sport that we don't usually see. I'm writing a YA contemporary right now that is really big on swimming. So something like that I'd be interested in seeing as well. As far as YA thrillers, I really want to see something where the suspense is on the page, really intense, lots of twists and turns. And then, of course, a very small part of my list is YA retellings, but I'm not looking for the traditional Shakespeare, Disney, that type of thing. I'm looking for more maybe myth retellings, something that has not been out there, something that has not been seen before. So if you've got one of those, I definitely want to see it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with our questions from Twitter. So we'll start with Summer again. And then if you don't want to answer it, just say pass. That way the next person in line will be able to answer. Okay, so question. Do you consider superpowers in a story fantasy or science fiction? And how would you judge something like the TV show Alphas or the movie Push?
Okay, well, I think there's a line. I think it has to do with what the superpowers can actually do. If the superpowers are related to something that's based in science, like, of course I'm drawing a blank, but like Peter Parker getting bit by a spider, you know, and that creates this reaction in his body where he becomes some other being and has superpowers. That came from a science background, or it can be explained that way. Whereas if you just have someone who has powers that come from some kind of natural or ethereal kind of place, I think that could be more of fantasy. Things like witchcraft and things like that that have to do more with personal ability that is not always explainable. As far as your comps, I am so sorry, I don't know those, so maybe another mentor will actually be able to help further the discussion.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If someone's on vacation after subbing, would mentors be okay waiting a little over 24 hours for requests? I'm not quite sure what they mean by this. Stacy, do you know?
So last year that actually happened to me. I had a mentee who, someone who submitted to me and said, hey, I'm not going to be here for the next couple days. If you request from me, it won't come in until Thursday or something. And I was okay with that because I knew up front. But then they didn't submit on Thursday when I had another 5 days or something, and by then I'd read so many more manuscripts. I read some of it, but it wasn't as much a contender because the excitement had been gone. So if I know ahead of time, and 24 hours is nothing, 24 hours we're not going to worry about. If it's a week and a half, then it's going to be difficult because we really have this timeline that we really need to get stuff done by. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this one's for Sharon. How close to agent ready is your ideal mentee's manuscript when they submit?
So, excuse me, I don't want something that is completely agent ready. If you think your manuscript is ready to be in front of an agent before you submit it to Pitch Wars, then you should be querying. It's hard to judge until I see it. Each manuscript will be different. Each manuscript will require a different amount of work to get it to the right level. I want something that someone is open to change. At the same time, I acknowledge that it's your story and that you're going to want to, control the direction, but I want you to be open to it, because that's the whole point of having the mentors, is for us to push you and push some boundaries and get you to take your story somewhere where it isn't currently. And as long as someone's open to that, I think it's good.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to answer that? Anyone else want to answer that question?
I'll jump in for a second. I think that if you have had both betas and CPs read your manuscript and they think it's ready, then I would jump on board with Sharon and say, yeah, I would query. If you feel like there may be something missing or something that needs a little work and you just need somebody else to really kind of give you feedback and help you just give it that final polish, then I would definitely say submit it.
Okay.
I'll jump
Anyone
in
else?
and somewhat, yeah, I'll jump in and say I kind of disagree. I think that it's really hard for new authors to judge whether or not they're ready or not. And sometimes you think that you are, and you go through these phases and you realize, oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. So there's no harm in submitting to Pitch Wars and getting feedback. Maybe you'll find out that there's something that needs work that you didn't know. So I vote yes.
I'd like to, Heather, can I say something too on that?
Absolutely, yes.
From personal experience, I know that no matter how many times an author goes over their manuscript, you're always going to be able to improve it. You're always going to see something that you can change. And sometimes you can't see it because you have lived with it for so long. So I think it's really important that if you think that you are at that level, that you are able to start sending out query letters, and you haven't done that yet, I think Pitch Wars is a great place to do it, and I wish I would have had the opportunity to submit, in the past, but it would have been a really great thing, and I think it's a good idea to give it a whirl.
Thanks. Okay, next question. We'll start with Kit, and then if anyone else wants to weigh in, that is great. Can you weigh in on first versus third point of view in YA? And as a mentor, do you have a preference for submissions?
That's a great question. I love both first and third point of view as a reader. I read avidly within YA, and I have some favorite books that are written in both first and third, so I wouldn't say that I come down really strongly in either camp. As with so many of the choices that you are going to be making as a writer, it really comes down to your story and what suits your narrator and the story that you're telling. And I will say as a writer that my books have been in first person thus far. I've written in both past and present tense. I'm excited to try third person at some point as a writer. It hasn't been right for my stories yet. There's certainly a trend currently in YA toward first person present, and I think that's great. I write in it. I love to read in it, but I certainly don't think that is the be-all, end-all. And right, again, it depends on your story, and as a mentor, I wouldn't push a mentee toward changing first versus third just based on personal preference. It would certainly depend on your story, and I would trust the choices that you're making. And if Rachel and I felt that your story could benefit from a different point of view, that might be something we would discuss, but it wouldn't be based on preference. It would be based on the story itself.
Okay. The other mentors, if you would also answer that question, that would be great. Kelly, I think you're next. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I think that it's important to remember, what your purpose is in choosing your point of view. Are you wanting to draw the audience super, super close and tight to your main character? Are you wanting to create a little bit of distance and question? I think a lot of it has to do with what you're trying to do with your story. But I think for me, a lot of times what happens with writing in third is that you can get a lot of filtering in there, and so there's this artificial distance between the reader and your character, and so it's hard to kind of get that immediacy. So if you're writing in third, just remember to do a close third, to make sure that you're stripping away filter words and really still giving us access to the essence of the character. Unless you're deciding, purposely that you want that distance between the character and the reader, like if you were creating an unreliable narrator or something like that. But I mean, I think the most important thing is just figure out what is the purpose and how is it serving your story.
I might just jump in and say,
Yeah.
I think you've also got to think about the genre that you're writing in. So if you're writing in fantasy and you're wanting to show like all these multiple point of views, like with Six of Crows and things like that, well then the third person point of view is really, really beneficial. And it depends on how many people you want to show. So if you're showing like more than 2 point of views in a story, then you're better off with the third. And are there scenes that you're going to want to show that are hidden behind the scenes? Like sometimes people can get away with it. Like if you have a look at the Outlander series, the first book's all written from first person point of view, and then when she moves into the second book of the series, she still keeps that first point of view, and everybody else is third. But like it's pretty rare that you'll get that to work. I've tried it and it sort of freaked people out that I was doing it like that when I tried submitting it places, so I went back to having totally first person. So think about your genre, think about the stories you want to show. Are there off scenes that you need to bring to the reader's attention that your main character can't show because they're not there? So take into account things like that when you're doing your storytelling, as whether you're going to do first or third. I know for me, I had a strong preference towards first for a very long time, but of late I've been reading a lot of YA fantasy, so like the Raven Cycle and Six of Crows and Throne of Glass, and I just find that really captivating. So I don't have a preference for either when they come through to me. I just think you've got to be true to your story and make sure that you're using the right sort of storytelling so you can get it all out there.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to weigh in real quick on that?
I will really quick. The first 2 books I wrote were all first-person past. And the reason why I did that is the story came to me. I felt like it was very personal and that their story needed to be told that way. The book I'm writing now, the YA Contemporary, is actually dual POV, male and female. And the reason I decided to do that was because it's really imperative to the story that you get both sides of what the characters are going through. And it just happened to work for the story. So I think you have to figure out where the heart of your story is. If it's something that needs to be told from a stepped away sort of perspective where you see all the goings on behind the scenes, then I think that third person should be your choice. But if this feels like a really personal story for your character, then I personally would like to be seeing it in first person POV, because I just think you get closer to the main character that way and you understand more of the story. But again, it goes really back to the base, which is what is your story about and how is the best way it can be told.
Thank you. Brenda, this next question I think might be a good one for you. What happens if a mentee hopeful gets a request for material from an agent they queried before Pitch Wars began?
So if you get a request for material, your mentor you can ask your mentor, and they'll help you through this. But what you would do would be to contact the agent and let them know that you are in Pitch Wars, and ask them if they would be willing to wait until you had your manuscript revised and after the mentoring round, and then your mentor will go ahead and advise you on what to say and what to do. So we'll walk you through that. Does that answer
Thank
that?
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So we haven't heard from Stacy for a while. So Stacy, we'll start with you on this question, and then anyone else can weigh in that wants to. What is your advice on how to add more tension into your manuscript?
I mean, tension is conflict, and there should always be conflict. I think there needs to be multiple layers as well. One of the things that I like to instruct writers to do is always have those emotional stakes in everything, and every you have the physical stakes of am I going to die or whatever, but even when it's a survival story, there has to be those emotions. Relationships is a great way to do that. Fears and internal dialogue occasionally can help with that as well. So just always having something that your character is worried about, something that your character is striving for. So in every page there should be something.
And does anyone else want to answer?
I'll jump in for that. Something that I think really helps me as a writer is thinking about what my main character wants in every single chapter. If I can define what he or she wants and needs going into every single scene, then that really helps me focus on creating the tension. Because if your character has a desire, there's probably also an obstacle. And if there isn't an obstacle, then you probably have a flat scene. So thinking about both wants and desires and thinking about what is standing in your character's way in every single chapter, not just throughout the novel as their overarching arc, but chapter by chapter, is really a way to focus on creating believable and palpable tension on the page.
I'm going to weigh in on that one as well. To go off what Kit said, I teach creative writing to high school seniors. So one of the things that I need to always tell them is that they need to understand that we need to know what their character is willing to risk throughout the entire book to get what they want and what they need. So there has to be that level of what they're willing to give up, what they're willing to die for, what they're willing to lose the love of their life for. What are those things that the character can be driven to do? And all of that helps to build that suspense.
I'd love to weigh in too. I think that, oh, can you guys hear me? Heather? Yeah? I think that for me, when you get to a technical or craft level on this, it has to do with using active voice instead of passive voice. You have to make sure that the words that you're using are steeped in tension as well. And it can't, you can't just say, she was afraid as the monster came toward her. It's like, oh, really? Was she? You have to use your words in a way that's going to pull the reader down the page, and that is in using words that are charged, that have emotion and description, and that are going to really immerse your reader, because I think a lot of times we get that distance, and that comes from passive voice, and you lose all of your tension as soon as you fall into passive voice. So just go through your manuscript and figure out, is this as active as it could be? And if it is, then most likely people are going to be racing to the end of the page.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else before we move on? Okay. I don't know even what this means. So it says, will anyone be mentoring tween MR manuscripts?
Is that tween magical realism?
Oh, maybe so. I don't know.
I'm going to say if that's what it is, tween is a tricky thing because you kind of put one foot in YA and one foot in middle grade. So I think that that's a little bit difficult question to ask because there's such a difference between what middle grade characters are going through and what their challenges are versus what YA characters are going through and what their challenges are. So anybody else want to weigh in? But without having a clear definition of what that person's talking about, I'm just going to say I think it needs to be a better definition if the book's going to be YA or middle grade.
Okay.
I thought I'd use an example. I recently read a book called Yellow by an Australian author, and the main character was like right on 14, which is like really early high school for here in Australia, and it was a younger voice for YA, but it worked really, really well because it really encapsulated those early years. So if you've got something and you've got the voice right, I think people will be open to it. Just make sure that the voice is appropriate for whichever category you're going to submit to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what advice do you have for handling flashbacks? How about we go with Kit? We haven't heard from you in a while.
Okay, flashbacks. Gosh, it's so specific to the manuscript, but I think that I don't even know how to address this one in a broad, general sense. I would say that there can be a risk of info dumping in flashbacks, which is something that you want to avoid generally. It can be a fine line between revealing important information for your characters from their past that is important for your reader to know, to understand the action in the present, and using flashback as a way to just generate a lot of backstory. So I think that the question to ask in terms of the necessity of flashbacks is the information that's being revealed in the flashback scene adding value to the information that's happening in the present of the manuscript? And if it's not, then it's probably not information that needs to be revealed through a flashback. There may be other ways to introduce necessary background information to your story without going into the flashback scene. If it's adding value to the present of the manuscript, then often flashback can be the way to convey that. I don't know if I really addressed that question in the best possible way, but hopefully some other mentors will jump in with some further advice.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I will. I actually am working on a flashback in my current story that I've been working with my editor. And one of the things that she said to me about it was, make sure you still hit all the senses and create that atmosphere in the flashback. So, don't just put the bare bones, still make it a fully fleshed out scene that will capture in your readers, but definitely make sure that you don't end up doing a big lot of waffle. So if you want to have a look at good flashbacks in YA, like maybe have a look back at the Hunger Games when Katniss is like remembering Peter in the first book. So you can do things like it. You can definitely do the flashbacks. Just don't overwrite them, as in don't make them too long. Make them nice and concise. Make sure they are exactly what's needed, but make sure you still make the writing quite full and engage the reader and engage all the senses.
Thank you. Okay. This one might be a good question for Brenda. We have discussed this a couple of times. So, where does the YA line end and the NA or adult line begin? My characters often possess a death wish, sometimes graphic.
So YA can have graphic in it. We're seeing YA going older, even 19, Sarah J. Maas. Eleanor Park has I think it's 18, right? Or college, freshman in college or something like that. So basically, it's when they're still, I guess it would be like, it can go older now. It doesn't have to be 17. 17 isn't set. So YA has really pushed for those graphic scenes and stuff like that. So I mean, I think it even has sex in it. So I think it has to do with the themes of YA. If it has that theme that way YA has, that you can still put it in YA. Anyone else have to? I mean, you all are YA authors. They probably all have a thought on what this YA to NA to adult would be. Does that answer it, though? That you can push it?
I can weigh in on this from personal experience. I have a YA contemporary that it has that kind of 1 foot on either side of the line, and it's difficult because you're still dealing with teenage issues, and I think when you step into the adult issues, you know, when you step out of that youthful kind of naivete to a real, it's hard to explain, even like a romance or something like that. Once you take that step over, you can tell when you have pushed it too far. And you know, with my manuscript, I had to tone it down a little bit, and you just know that you're pushing that boundary. And I think that a mentor will be able to look at a manuscript and say, this is really pushing it, that maybe this should have been an NA, or this is what you need to do to make it solidly in YA.
Thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on this before I move on?
I'll just say something really quick. Gail Foreman has a book, actually 2 books, Just One Day and Just One Year. And her character in Just One Day is graduating from high school. She goes on a trip to Europe. And so she's kind of crossing that line between graduating from high school, going into college, and actually the last part of the book is her actually in college. So I think a lot of times it comes down to themes. With Just One Day, I felt like it was perfect for YA because it was kind of growing up and moving on, whereas, you know, leaving that high school and going into college, whereas NA tends to be more already in college, facing more adult issues, more adult themes. But I think it really depends upon what your theme of your book is, what is happening to your character and how they're growing and changing, and what kind of issues they're dealing with as well.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. Thanks, guys.
You said it, Brenda. You said it just fine.
I was like, I know what I'm trying to say, but I'm not saying it. Okay.
I'll add
Okay.
one. Can I add one?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just if your question is whether or not it's too graphic, it's too dealing with dark issues, might be too dark for teens, that really shouldn't be an issue because you can go very far within teen. I mean, you can deal with drugs, you can deal with rape, you can deal with, you know, you can deal with suicide. So if it's that issue, then it's more about the coming of age and the feeling behind the storyline than just aspects within the book.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any thoughts versus traditional publishing or self-publishing? And this person says, I hear that even with a company behind you, you still have to do all your promoting. I don't even know who to ask this question to. I'm kind of feeling a little lost.
I think that, I'll take that. Okay, I think that depending on what publication you want to go through is personal and what you feel that you want to do. And yes, even when you go traditional, you're going to have to get out there and market your book. You're the best seller, for the best person to sell your own book. And you'll have a team behind you, but it's you that has to step out and really market your book yourself. I mean, not like, you know, like help with it and talk about your book and be enthusiastic about your book. Anybody else?
I'll jump in for that one too. For me, the biggest difference isn't necessarily marketing, because you're going to have to do some your own, no matter what. But it's opportunity. So with Entangled, I got my book in bookstores. I got a review with the school library journal. My book was in libraries and stuff like that. It's extremely hard to do those sorts of things as a self-published author. You have to realize that certain genres are going to sell better certain ways. So if you're writing romance, ebook is how they usually sell. So self-publishing is, but if you're writing a really dark, gritty story, it's going to sell more, especially with young adult in libraries and schools and stuff. So traditional publishing would be really good for that as well.
Anyone else before I move on? Okay. All right. What is, and I think most of us should probably answer this question, what is your favorite part of revising and editing and your least favorite part of revising and editing? And if we could just start with Summer and just go all the way through, that would be good.
Okay, I actually love revising so much, and my favorite part of revising is finding like the little tiny things that my subconscious put in there that I didn't really know why they were there in the first place, and then kind of fleshing those out and giving them a real place in the story. For me, revising is about layering. It's about taking all of the stuff that's happening and then refining that and putting in, you know, you're getting your setting in there and making sure your tension is amped up and making sure that your character is shining through. It's getting your basic plot down on the page. A lot of the times that's drafting, and revising then is really chiseling it out and making it 3D. And now I've totally forgotten the second part of the question. Heather?
Okay, I'm sorry. It's basically just your favorite part of revising and editing, and what's your least favorite part? That's it.
Right. Least favorite part is revising. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have a least favorite part because that's honestly totally my favorite part. So maybe somebody else is crankier than I am.
I'm not cranky. My favorite part is I like planning. So before writing a book, I like that part, and then the writing sometimes can be awful and sometimes is good, depends. And then revising, I like taking a look back and saying, okay, this is what it needs, and really thinking it through in a logical way and a creative way as well, and really fleshing it out. So I like that part. I don't like having to go through a book 7 times. It gets really frustrating when you're doing it for changing the same thing or switching it back and it doesn't seem right, and just gets frustrating sometimes when you're doing it over and over, but that's just kind of how it goes. So.
Okay, so for me, I'm currently like revising a book with my editor, and as well as a work in project. And I guess on my work in project, my favorite part is like getting to getting to flesh it out and getting to add those layers. But also, I'm a real pantser when I write, and my stories usually have a twist in the end. So I don't even know the whole process when I'm going there. So I love going back and going, I wrote this here, this will work, I can expand it out. I'm really bad at adding red herrings in. I love like trying to trick people out and not having them guess the twist. So I love putting red herrings in and having fun with it like that. My least favorite part with revising is being reminded how much further I have to go as a writer. I am terrible at crutch words. Oh gosh, like if I ever write look again in a manuscript, I just want to uppercut myself because it's I do it all the time, and I've been told don't worry, when you get rid of one crutch word, another one will pop up. So yeah, crutch words are like the bane of my existence when I'm revising.
I
I also really love revising. When I'm writing a first draft, even when I am 90% complete with the draft, there's still always this moment of panic every time I sit down to write, where I think, what if this doesn't work? I have this fear that it's just gonna break. And once I have a complete draft written and I can focus on revising, it's like this giant relief because I have the scaffolding there. And once I'm into revising, I feel like that's when I can really play. So my favorite part of revising is everything. I really love revision. I love being able to find connections in the manuscript that maybe I didn't realize were there, or they're seeds that I planted and had forgotten about, and I can really draw out those threads in revision. The only thing that I don't like about revision is the grunt work aspect of it. I've done things where I've changed tense in a manuscript from past to present and then back to past again, and you know, just trying to get the voice right and making all of those minor changes can be just really time consuming, and I wouldn't say that I love it, but I still don't hate it. I really like to revise, and my mentee will be revising a lot with Rachel and me.
I really enjoy the revision process. I draft very, very quickly. So once I get that draft down on paper, sometimes I can draft an entire manuscript in 6 weeks. So if I can get it down and ready to go, then you actually, like Kit said, you get to play, and that's where the fun stuff is. That's where you get to explore really what makes your characters tick, because initially you might have some ideas of what they said and what they looked like and what they did, but you really get that opportunity to dig deep into their motivations and really get to know them for who they are and start to see them develop as whole people in your story. So that's really a great part of that. The least favorite part of revision is I have so many filter words that I have to go back through and look for. No matter how well I think I have done my job as a writer, I can go back and I will still find 63 coulds in my manuscript, or these other words, feels, and it just drives you crazy. But you know they're there. It's part of the process. You go through and you get them changed and you get it worked out.
Okay, my least favorite is starting. My favorite is ending. And I'm just doing that for comic relief because everybody said everything that I like to do in revising. Am I on? I can't even tell because Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because I can hear. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of crutch words too, and I also like to go in and plant clues and add some twists or do whatever. But I'm pretty when I'm not under a rush deadline, my drafts are pretty clean. I try to make them pretty clean because I'm kind of a strange person that has to have, I can't have a really rough draft. It has to be pretty close to better because I'll write and then before I start writing the next day, I'll edit what I wrote the day before when I have time. Lately I haven't had time, and poor Heather has been helping me edit behind me because I have to get this book out by August 1st. So, but revisions to me are just fun to get that all cleaned up, and you start feeling really good about the words that you wrote.
So I have a journalism background, which means no fluff, nothing. So my first drafts are really dry, don't have a lot of layers, as Summer was referring to. So revising for me is huge because I get the draft out, I spit it out, and then I have to go back and I have to look at character development, setting, sight, smell, all those things that I may have not gotten in my first draft just because I write very sparsely. So I usually have at least 2 or 3 rounds where I go back in and I actually add and layer and develop characters and things like that. So for me, that's fun because I'd rather do that than have all the ideas of where I want my story to go tumbling around in my head. Once I have that, I think as Kit said, that kind of scaffolding up, then I can go back and I can really concentrate on my characters, concentrate on developing better dialogue, those types of things. The thing that I hate most about revising is the final read-through. I kind of, by that point, I'm so sick of the book. I'm like, let's just get it on my iPad and read it through and get it done. I love the story, but by that time, I'm ready to put it into somebody else's hands and have them read it and have them tell me what I'm missing, what I need to add, that type of thing. So I'm just really anxious about getting the revisions done and getting them into somebody else's hands.
Okay, thank you. So we have quite a few more questions, and we only have 15 minutes. So we may not get to everyone's questions, but we'll try as hard as we can. And hopefully, if we don't get to everyone's, we will get on the hashtag and try and answer them for you later. Okay, so we're back to Summer. Our next question for YA Fantasy. Would high word count over 100K sabotage an otherwise good query or first chapter? Summer.
You know, once you get above that 100K mark, that's when people kind of start going, ooh, are they using, are they telling their story in the best way? And this is especially true for YA. I mean, you have a little bit of wiggle room, but in getting to that first initial gatekeeper of getting an agent, of getting someone to actually look at it, they want to see that you can tell a story efficiently. And speaking from experience, because my first draft of my book that I got my agent with was like 140,000 words. So I tend to be like a trifle wordy. So I had to learn a lot, you know, about what's really necessary. So when you're looking at your word count and you're looking and trying to figure out what you can cut, yeah, the little things like filter words and doubling up dialogue tags with action beats, those things can be helped if you cut them. That can help with word count. But for me, the most important thing that I learned was you've got to look at every scene like it's in a row of dominoes, and all of those dominoes are knocking down the next one to get to the end of the story. And if a scene is not doing its job to knock down the next domino, if it's there because you like it, or because, oh, this reveals character, or, oh, I really wanted to get this setting in, if it's not doing multiple things at once, then it's not necessary, and you can probably cut it or condense it with other scenes. That said, you know, there are always exceptions. I feel like we have to throw in that caveat every time because, yeah, there are exceptions. But for me, when I was in my English degree, my teacher, he wouldn't let us write papers over 2 pages. And he said that writing short is always harder than writing long. So if you can find a way to try to write short and just see how that works for you, I think that that's some of the best advice I've ever gotten. Sorry, wordy.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
I will. I actually have the opposite problem. I tend to write short. I don't know if that's like, oh, I'm so awesome, but I have a problem with making it long enough. So, but when I'm reading as a mentor, honestly, I have a habit of not even looking at the word count. Probably once I request and I realize it's 250,000 words, then I'm gonna be like, oh boy. But if I really like the story, I'm most likely going to request. And I think that I would be good at helping you cut. I'm always like, when I'm reading books that I edit and stuff like that, I'm always like, you don't really need the scene. Like, if you really want to cut some words, like right here is where you do it. So I think that I would be good at that. Of course, that means more work for me because it's more reading, but, you know, what are you going to do? So I don't mind that much as long as it's not extreme.
Thank you.
I'd like to weigh in on that too. I agree. I think even if you were slightly over 100,000 words, I mean, some of the most popular YA books out there, Twilight was over 110,000 words. But then again, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is only, I think, about 75,000 words. So there's both ends of the spectrum. And I think that if you do get a request from a mentor, they're going to be able to see very, very quickly whether or not you are using economy of language with what you have written. Are they words that you have to have, or are they words that you're just putting in there? Is it fluff? And very, very quickly, a mentor will be able to say to you, this is fluff, this is what you cut, and this is really necessary description and that you need to have. So it's going to depend on the manuscript.
Okay, thank you. So how do you feel about a comp being dated but still loved? And I actually know the answer to this from an agent that I talked to recently, who said that if it's a comp that's over 5 years old, you shouldn't use it. So even if it's still loved, a lot of times if things aren't really current, then it's hard to use them as to pitch your book, because they don't know how that comp would sell in this particular market that's happening now. So does anyone else have anything they want to add to that? Nope.
I'll add really quick. In some of the contests that I've judged recently, and then with doing the one I host, Sun versus Snow, especially people who are newer to the business, they tend to pick things like Hunger Games, Twilight, things like that. And we always advise them that they need to dig deeper. Agents don't want to see the next Hunger Games. That's already been done. Same thing with Twilight. So dig deeper in your genre, do a little bit more reading, and try to find, comps that are what I consider like mid-list, titles that people know. But what happens with comps is that comps are effective in the fact that agents look at comps to try to figure out where your book might end up on the shelves. So they need to have some idea of something that's fairly recent and something that is a good measure of what you're actually sharing. Sometimes it's not great to say, oh, it's this comp, and then the agent goes in and reads your partial or whatever and thinks, oh, this book is nothing like that book. So again, my advice would be to really go back and research in your genre and try to find something that's fairly recently released, maybe within the last year or two. Again, that will help the agent decide whether or not your book has a place on the shelves.
Thank you. Okay. We only have time for a couple more questions. So let's see here. So here's a good one. If feedback has been, quote, strong writing, but it just doesn't work for me, they're wondering if you think that voice is the problem, and are you open to something that possibly has trouble with the voice? So I have no idea where we ended up.
How is that a fun question?
I'm not sure it's a fun question.
I'm not answering that. I was just wondering. Okay.
We can end on a fun question.
I'll jump in and start that one. So I believe the question was, if the feedback has been that the writing is strong in the manuscript, but that the book just doesn't work for the agent or the reader, then is voice necessarily the problem? I think it could be, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that means voice is at issue. I think strong writing is great. They're telling you that that your writing is solid. Sometimes voice is closely connected to the writing. Sometimes there's a divergence. But I think often the just doesn't work for me is sort of a catch-all feedback that you get. Agents will say, you know, they just didn't connect, or the project just wasn't right for them, and that can be any host of reasons that they didn't connect on a personal level. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that means definitely voice. Would I be willing to work with a mentee on voice-related issues, though? Yes, of course. I mean, just like any element of writing, if there's a manuscript that really calls to me and that Rachel and I decide is our pick, if you know, there are elements that need revision, which of course there will be, and if voice is one of them, then yes, then that's something that that we will work with our mentee on. But I wouldn't necessarily connect that specific feedback to unnecessarily meaning voice in this context.
Okay, we are going to end with a fun question. If you robbed a bank, and everyone has to answer this, if you robbed a bank, which fictional character would be your sidekick? So let's start with Summer and go down the line.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm terrible at these questions. I would choose, I'm so bad at like spur of the moment. Okay, last book I read, A Court of Mystic Fury. I'm gonna bring Reese with me because he can get us out of anything, and then he can get into me as much as he wants. There you go.
Okay, so my first thought was Peter Pan, just because he's awesome. But then I thought about it a little more, and I'm going to go with another classic and say Tom Sawyer, because he's just so clever and fun, and so that's who I would want to rob a bank with me. He'd make somebody else rob the bank, but.
So I'd have to say Harley Quinn. Like, I know she's not your typical fictional literary character, but I love her. I was a huge fan of the 90s Batman cartoon series, which is when she was actually brought in, not into the comic books, and I think she's fun, hilarious, can be naughty but can be good, and some good girl power.
Oh, it's me. Sorry. I would take Rue from the Hunger Games with me as my fictional sidekick to rob a bank, because she is clever and resourceful and is also super cute, so everyone would be distracted by her while I was robbing the bank.
Well, I think I would have to vote for any one of the Cullen family, because I need someone to drive the getaway car, and that's the only way I'm getting out of there.
Okay, and since I'm writing a story right now, and deadline in the story about his son in high school, I would have to say Thor, because of his hammer. We can crash through the safe, and then he can lightning strike everybody, and we could just go. And then we fly off with his hammer, I guess.
Okay, so I'm going to pick Poppy from April Tucholsky's Wink Poppy Midnight. And sorry, April, I think I just butchered your last name. But I picked Poppy because she's clever, she's devious, and she's supposedly supposed to be beautiful, so she could probably just give a wink to the security guard and we'd be right out of there.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're so glad to have you, and this live chat will be posted on the blog soon after this ends, which is in a couple seconds. And
I have one more thing to say.
Oh,
before you
okay.
finish.
Brenda has one more thing to say.
Join us on August 2nd for a 2-hour live chat. We'll be rotating people in, and it'll be the night before, or right before the submission window opens on August 3rd, or maybe sooner, who knows? And also the submission window opens, I said August 3rd. And don't forget to do the scavenger hunt. You can, if you've solved the scavenger hunt and you've put the answer in the form, after all the mentors make their final pick, we're going to have a drawing, and there will be 3 writers who get to go through the mentoring period for middle grade, young adult, YA, and adult. Without, you don't have to go through the application period. It's random pick. So I think that's it. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us.